Now let's look at running a MapReduce job. It's easier to do it in Hue than from the terminal, so we're going to start there. And I'm in the samples at the home page in Hue. And you can see that there are some jobs here. Here's a MapReduce that sleeps. So I'm going to go ahead and open this up. Now it opens in a complex environment called Uzi that I'm going to cover in a subsequent movie. But inside of here, I've got a sleep MapReduce job. It just basically runs a word count and then it sleeps. Now these samples are read-only, so what I need to do is make a copy of this, which I'm going to do by clicking copy, and I'll call it copy. And then I'm going to go into the MapReduce job here and click edit. I'm going to call it demo. Now if I wanted to, I could just run it from here. And notice the compiled code is under this location, Hadoop examples jar. And I could just run it from here. And here I've got my parameters, which are, I've got one reduce task, I've got a mapper class, a reducer, the map out key, the map output value, and some other parameters in here. I can also add properties, and I can look at the advanced. Now I can schedule this. So the execution environment here is pretty fancy. And I wanted to show you this because as developers, when you write your MapReduce jobs, you're writing them in Eclipse, and you're usually using unit tests to test them. But in production, they're usually run in this kind of an environment. And I'm going to go ahead and click Done. And then I could schedule this, but just to show you what it looks like, I'm going to submit it. And I need to save it. It warns me there was unsaved changes. And I'm going to put a really, really small sleep time in here. This is a demonstration of a job with the sleep time in it. And now you can see here's the job statuses. This is what I was talking about in an earlier movie where you can see in a lot of these enterprise tools what the status of jobs are. And there you can see you got an actual job browser too. So there it's sleeping. Another thing that's important is you have an ID. All executing jobs have an ID because they're unique, and that's what you use to track them. Notice on the bottom I can kill or I can suspend this job. If I want to, I can go over here to the job browser as well, because Uzi is actually a coordinator where you can run more than one job at a time. It just happens to be where Cloudera puts their sample, because again, from an enterprise standpoint, it's really common that you're going to chain jobs. Now you see this little icon over here? These are your logs and your nodes, and it's a visual cue of the execution process. Now this is a little bit faked here because how many nodes do we have in the pseudo-distributed example? We only have one. Why does it have three? Because the default for HDFS in fully distributed is 3 copies of the data nodes. You may remember that from previous movies. So I'm over here in the job browser just to give you a sense, again, of the kind of information that you get. And you can see, here's the job ID. It's just a different view for the job that we started. And then it succeeded. And then we have some other jobs that I ran, and you can see most of them succeeded. Looks like all of them. I had some failed jobs earlier. And they tell you the duration, when it was submitted. And then if I want to go in and look at it, I can see information about the success. I can see the tasks. Notice there's 2 maps and a reduce. And this, looking for that word succeeded, my first attempt. And there I can see information about where it was run. If I had any counters associated with it, which I don't in this case, and logs for this particular task. Notice it's using standard out, a standard error, and syslog. So verbose logging, as I talked about, but I wanted to kind of give you guys the reality of this as you were looking at it. So this is at the level of the task. Now, if I go back to the job, I also was showing the attempt there. So then I can go in and I skipped over this kind of quickly. There's 2 mappers and 1 reducer here. So if I go to the reducer, again, we have a succeeded. Now, where did this succeed? What succeeded? I didn't show you the paths going in, going out, so I can go back over to the file browser, and I think it's under test output, and there's the _success message. And really that's all it is. It's just _success. That's the message you're looking for. But where's the data? Part -M-00000. And you can see this one looks like a pass-through. It didn't do a word count. This is basically a different Shakespeare that I ran earlier. Now, if this were processed, then it would be a list of key values, so words, comma, count. But this one I just did a dummy job just to make sure that it worked. And you notice I set the output location here. So if you wanted to run your own job, you'd go to the job designer, and then you could submit a job, or notice the types of jobs here. Now, as we go throughout this course, we're going to cover some of the other ways that you can create MapReduce jobs. I mentioned Hive in the introduction. We'll be looking at pigs, Scoop, some of these other things. And also I mentioned in a couple of movies previous, within MapReduce itself, there's several ways to do it. MapReduce, streaming, so on and so forth. So if we're going to be working on Java, once we are done writing our Java, how would we then submit it? We would jar it up, and then we would give it a name, and then we would point this to our jar file, and then we would run it. So it's really pretty easy. There's the jar path. We would just put that in and pass the arguments and then save it. So this is an easy wrapper for you once you're done writing your jar file to run your MapReduce. Now, from a testing point, you usually will just test it inside of Eclipse, and often you can use a unit test or some kind of real simple test so you don't have to deploy it to production. Some people do that. I actually like to jar it up and then run it through a either simple Cloudera instance, which just uses a local file system, or a pseudo-distributed, which uses the single HDFS node, like the one I'm showing for this class. So I wanted to share with you the processes that I actually use when I'm working with MapReduce code.